Students of Reddit, what was the most awkward time you saw a teacher outside of school? Story 1. I was babysitting for one of the high school teachers probably when I was in 10th or 11th grade. Him and his wife get home, and I call my dad to come pick me up, and I was just hanging out in the kitchen waiting for him, chatting with the wife about the kids. Then all these cars start pulling up, and people flood into the house with cases of beer, bottles of booze. It was all teachers from the high school that taught me or were currently teaching me. They were all so drunk and would sober up when they saw me and try to make awkward conversation for a few minutes. Apparently the teacher I was babysitting for offered up his house for the after party or whatever they did that night. I think it was more awkward for them than it was for me. I especially remember my French teacher, who was such a buttoned-up and serious middle-aged lady, literally stumbling into the house giggling, hair all a mess, plastered. She started telling me how well I did on a presentation I had earlier that week and how happy I'd be when I got my grade back. The thing that got me the most was when my dad finally got there, and in walking to the car, a few of them were in the garage smoking cigs, and tried to hide them when I walked by. Story 2. My mother once told me the story of how, when she was in high school in England in the 1970s, she saw her teacher in a pub toilet, drunk, slumped against the wall. My mother was around 15 at the time, and shouldn't have been drinking in a pub on a Saturday night. The teacher recognized her, and drunkenly said, "I won't say anything if you don't." Story 3. Bumped into an old teacher at the urinal while being completely intoxicated at a bar. Opened up to him about how much his class meant to me. The class was gym. Story 4. When I was in 4th grade, after my parents divorced, my aunt came to live with us for a while. One night, I was watching TV and procrastinating doing my homework. There was a knock at the door, and it was my teacher, Mr. L. I was so shocked that I blurted out, "I'm just about to start my homework, I swear." He laughed and said, "No, machine press, we're here for your aunt, is she ready?" That's when I noticed he was with his wife and some man who was to be my aunt's date for the evening. The 4 of them were going to concert or something. I felt pretty stupid about it, especially because he liked to bring it later and laugh about the idea that he would come by student houses and check on their homework progress. Story 517. Senior year. Snuck into a 21 and up bar with some friends that were not from my school. Get a bar and wait to order drink. Bartender is current art teacher. Something she likes to do on weekends, I assumed. We stare at each other for 2 seconds, then she asks what'll it be for all of us. Order gin and tonic. She serves me drink, and we go about our night. School was the same, so 1010 would drink with art teacher again. Gin and tonic was good too. Story 6. Not a student, but the parent of one. My daughter was clothes shopping at the mall, and she didn't notice at first that the woman fitting her a Victoria's Secret was her science teacher. Story 7. When I was in high school, I ran into my middle school history teacher at the movies. He was with his boyfriend, who happened to be my high school art teacher. It had long been rumored that they were gay together, and this confirmed it. They try to act as if they had simply bumped into one another there. Super awkward. Story 8. I smoke a lot in the treehouse in my parents' house. One summer after college, I looked out the door as I was taking a fat bong rip and made eye contact with my old high school English teacher walking her dog, gave her a casual head nod, and slowly closed the door. Story 9. I was out of class sick for the day back in 4th grade. My mom had to go to the store for something, but didn't want to leave me home alone, so I went with her despite my 101F fever. We're at checkout, and I see my teacher, and he's seen me. Panicking, I told him that I'm sick and not playing hooky. He laughed and said he was. Edit 116. This is my most upvoted comment ever. Story 10. This is going back almost 10 years. When I was a sophomore, I ran in my math teacher at a Spencer's. It was awkward because she had that hat up and almost 2 foot. She was a tiny lady. I felt bad for her vagina. Story 11. It's never awkward for me, but one of my favorite times it was awkward for them was at a local music festival. This was one of those 3-day weekend things where everyone is enjoying some sort of mind-altering experience or another. I ran into a group of students who were just blaze tripping on something. I mean, barely functional. I let them try to play it off for a while before I showed mercy and moved on. They tried so hard to seem sober. Freaking hilarious. Story 12. I delivered food to a brewery for an old history teacher. She's 5 years older and clearly drunk. She got all close up on me, but gave me a $10 tip, so it was cool. Story 13. I had a college professor who was a massive. He would mark down your grade for asking questions if he thought the question was dumb. One student got up and left in the middle of class and apparently walked directly to advising to change majors. One day he drove past us in a restaurant parking lot, and he stopped to have a perfectly pleasant and normal chat, as if he wasn't crazy. Story 14. 2nd grade teacher was missing for a few days. We had a substitute. I didn't think anything of it until his mugshot popped up on the local news one night, and they said he had molested a bunch of kids in the class above me. My mom was like, "Well, now you know." Story 15. When I was in high school, I went to my friend's house to smoke some weed. We went to the shed in his backyard, and we walked in on his dad and our physics teacher smoking a bowl. So we stayed and smoked their weed instead of ours. Story 16, when I was 18, I went on a stag do with my mate's older brother, and the best man was an old teacher of mine, top bloke, and he bought me at one point. Wasn't actually awkward now. I write out a few years ago, when I was still in high school, my mom and I went to the local swimming pool. When we were changing our clothes, I saw my math teacher approximate 45 years old in the dressing room, as well helping her children dress themselves, and then herself. My math class has always been awkward thereafter, as I could not unsee her hanging breasts anymore. Story 17, my GF met her teacher in holidays. He was having his honeymoon and had the hotel room directly above the room of my GF. He wasn't too pleased when he noticed that. Story 18, philosophy teacher, community college. Dude totally opened my eyes, then tried to open my pants, came back after a few years after I took his class. We had some lunch and caught up. He kept telling me the ultimate journey was to expose ourselves, to be vulnerable. He kept saying he was safe and that I could expose with him in his apartment if I wanted to. I didn't shame. Awesome teacher. Story 19, the guy who's going to be a teacher and sometimes teaches us. Supervised by a teacher, we talked to our trainee teacher at a party who was completely drunk and shared a bottle of alcohol with us. Later, we ate scrambled eggs at 4 a.m. and he slept on the couch. The walk of shame the next day was quite embarrassing for him. Story 20, there is this little vacation town about 20 minutes away from where I grew up. It's fun to hang out there in the summer because of all the shops and lakeshore festivities, live music in the streets, etc. I had just graduated 8th grade, and my friends and I were walking around the streets one summer evening. We saw our 7th grade English teacher and some of his friends walking toward us. Hey, Mr. Whistler, fake name. He proceeded to stop mid-stride and freeze. He stayed that way for a few seconds with his eyes wide, and then looked around and went and hid behind a tree, just peeking out at us every few seconds. We were cracking up laughing and walked over to him like, WTF are you doing? He says, I may have done drugs, and you shouldn't see me like this. He was probably in his mid-20s at the time. He looked paranoid as all, and his friends were in tears from laughing so hard. It was great. Story 21, strip bar, down in Texas. Granted, we were a crazy bunch of HS football players in a small Texas town that was obsessed with our team and our season. And our coach was a total. Used to make guys play hurt. We had enough and stole a cop car and went to a strip bar. Dang if Ms. Davis wasn't there as one of the dancers. She stripped to Hot for Teacher. Story 22, played in a rock band and had a show an hour and a half away. My chemistry teacher lived in the same neighborhood as the guy who drove the van, and his wife was their band director at school. We get about 15 minutes from home on our way back, and we recognized my teacher's car in front of us, swerving all over the road. Rumble strips, oncoming traffic, you name it. Guy was wasted. I do not approve, of course. Monday was very awkward, though he had no idea. Edit corrected autocorrect incorrectness. Story 23, I worked at a local Target store after high school. My band instructor came in and bought a pack of condoms and came through my checkout. He chatted me up for a bit, and it was weird since band went on trips for parades at festivals. His family came with us a lot. His wife was friendly, but his kids were mostly terrible. Glad he was using protection. Story 24, when I was in high school. I went to a bar with my fake ID. I was only 16 at the time. I went up to the bar and was just about to order with my ID when it was pulled out of my hand by a person sitting 2 chairs away. I quickly looked over and realized it was my world studies teacher. He started laughing and said, "Don't serve her. She's 16, and this is really good." School was really awkward the next day when he announced where he had seen me and the circumstance of the homeroom. I never lived that one down. I was in alternative school. We definitely had a more friendly relationship with our teachers at its Pelling. Story 25, in high school, I was the student director of our broadcasting class. So the teacher had my number. She but dialed me 4 years after graduation. She realized she did when she heard my voice in her pocket and then engaged me in an awkward how you been conversation. Story 26, I saw my old teacher today as I was walking my dog. He asked what I was doing, and I said I was an all I do is disable people to their schools and stuff I do not have with people. I walked off before I realized what I told him. Well, at least he did not ask for my number. Story 27, college. French professor who was legit from France at a party at the Jew frat doing a line of coke after he got past the bong whilst holding a cigarette. The awkward eye contact was priceless. I never went to class again, and he gave me a B. Story 28, like in most of Europe, in our last year of school, we have to pass an exam to be able to apply to university. So on our last day, the whole year gathered in the woods, about a 20-minute walk from where I live, to get wasted. Somehow, our chemistry teacher got wind of our plans, so he hopped on his bike and joined us. When he arrived, no one knew what he was doing here or who invited him. Turns out he heard some talk about it and went searching for us in the woods. Fast forward to 3 or 4 or so, and my friends and I are heading home. After all, there's drinking to be done in the morning. Our teacher has been chugging down on a bottle of vodka all the time. He also brought some stuff from his lab that made for some pretty colors in our fire pit. After about half a kilometer, we see our teacher riding his bike down the road. He stops to have a chat with us. Nothing too bad, but he's clearly pissed, and I'm getting uncomfortable because I still had to pass an oral exam in his course. We finally made it out of the woods, and he swings himself on his bike and tries to take off. Well, he's way past the point of being able to ride the bike home and face-plant straight into the pavement. His nose and hands all bloated. He tries it again and fails. The way home was extremely steep, so we tried talking him into accompanying us and leaving the bike behind, but he refuses, tries to shake our hands with his covered in blood, and says his goodbyes. We do our best to stop him from getting on his bike again and somehow manage, under threats of calling the cops or our parents on him, to bring him close to one of my Paul's home. He runs to his house, telling him he's going to wake up his parents to get his bike lock. We locked up his bike and never looked back. We only heard him yell he would have pushed it anyway. Next day, he didn't show up for class, and sometime later he turned up with his arm in bandages. Needless to say, I passed the exam without knowing. Good times. Story 29. This was a few months ago. I was out with my friends and was telling them how much I hated this teacher, so much that I compared him to Satan. I turn around and see him sitting in the table behind us. Story 30. Met my awkward math teacher. Always looked like he had it in class. When standing behind some girls in the shower of a swimming pool, wearing a super tight tanga, looking thingy, God, I was scared. Story 31. My third grade teacher and I had an inside joke about Austin Powers where we would, quote, fire the laser. Fast forward to when I was about 15. I was at a party with my parents to go to one of their adult gatherings for Halloween. I was inside dancing and goofing off with some of my friends when I bumped into an older lady. I looked and thought she looked really familiar. Well, she apparently had the same thought and slurred, fire the laser, for the entire night. I got to watch one of my favorite teachers ever be plastered and just not giving it all while she had to go to school after the weekend to teach little third graders. It was hilarious, but extremely weird to see. Story 32. My guidance counselor was also our exterminator. He came by to do his 6-month spray right after my parents called him to tell him they wanted to send me to military school. Story 33. At AA, I'm glad they're getting help, but it was so awkward and normally don't go to that meeting because I don't live in my hometown anymore, but while visiting family, I went to a meeting there and saw them. Story 34. Skipped school to go to a concert. A teacher who apparently did the same was also at said show. As long as neither of us breathed a word against the other, it was our secret. Story 35. In high school, I kept my hair long, which was a big problem for the Catholic school I attended. I was constantly getting detention and Saturday school for not cutting it. My mom was pretty tired of having to deal with this particular dean, telling her there's so many more problems with the school. What was the big deal if I kept my hair long? A few days before graduation, I cut all of my hair off. The dean came into the pharmacy where I worked in the photo development department. She walked up to me and said, "Why couldn't you have just cut your hair like this the last 2 years?" I asked her if she needed photos developed. She said no. I walked away. I didn't have to talk to that anymore. She was red-faced. Story 36. My old ceramics teacher from high school used to rip on me all the time for being stoned in art class. I eventually cleaned up and joined the military, and I was home for leave and driving on the highway when I see this goofy cube car coming up ahead of me with all these familiar bumper stickers about art and loving Earth. I go to pull up next to him, and he was smoking a bowl while driving on the highway. I gave him a wave once he noticed me, but I don't think he recognized me, and he pulled off. A few years later, I saw he and his wife at Wakarusa, and we shared a bowl together, and I joked about the time I caught him smoking on his drive home, and he just goes, "I thought that was you, but I figured you'd be in prison, so I just discounted it." Story 37. My second grade teacher was horrible. She told my mother that I was so stupid I would never be able to read or tell time. Needless to say, my mom had me transferred to another class that year where I learned to read and tell time just fine. Fast forward to high school. I was working at a bookstore, avid reader, when my second grade teacher came in and asked for my help finding numerous romance novels. She didn't recognize me, so after I helped her find what she was looking for, I ran her up as so well that will be 59, 67 misses. Campbell name changed. "How would you like to pay?" I watched as she slowly realized in horror who I was. I smiled and said it was nice to see her again. Although I wish I would have mentioned how ironic it was I worked in a bookstore, seeing as I was so clearly stupid. "You Mrs. Campbell?" This was a couple years ago. My twin girls were under a year old, and we were headed home after running some errands. While driving through the only intersection with a traffic light in our small town, my car decided to die timing belt or chain. We were stranded in the middle of the intersection during the after 5 o'clock busyness of everyone getting off of work. My old government teacher happened to be walking by, asked if we were okay, and proceeded to direct traffic around us. He spotted a couple people he knew in the oncoming traffic and flagged them out of their cars and had them push my car into an alley. So we were out of the way. He stayed with us until my parents were able to come and get us. Not exactly awkward looking back, but at the time I was mortified. Story 38, at family friend's wedding years after I left the school. I said hi to her just to be polite and conform to social norms. We spoke for a few minutes, and when I turned to walk away and go somewhere else, she turned to her friend and said that she hated seeing students out of school, and it is so awkward. Story 39, just saw him at an Arby's. Had him for 3 years, and all he could say to me was, "I don't remember you, but you don't look like you need to be eating Arby's." Story 40, I told my teacher I couldn't stay after school because I had to catch a bus. Then she saw me at the store right next to school with some friends, and she said, "You had to catch a bus, huh?" Story 41, I was once delivering food downtown and saw my English teacher getting literally thrown out of a bar. He was clearly faced and half crying, half yelling at the bouncer, who tossed him out. The next day, I asked him if he had been downtown the night before, because I thought I saw him, but I wasn't totally sure. The look on his face was priceless. And I happened to get as on all my papers after that. Story 42, I went to an international school in Thailand. My friend's parents owned 2 bars and would hang out there. Behind the bars was an alley of gay bars. Next door was a strip joint. We saw the really touchy-feely Mr. Norman come out of gay bar alley with a teenager. Later, that same friend's dad found a bunch of naked kid photos in Mr. Norman's desk and got him fired. Mr. Norman, another time we saw the new computer teacher who had just become a dad leave the strip joint next door. He saw us and quickly left. The next day, my friend and I were called into the principal's office because a teacher had reported seeing us go into a strip joint, which was weird because we couldn't really get in trouble for that. I guess he just wanted to cover his own. I was in the car receiving full audio, and my teacher saw me in the car. My lady picked her head up. It was kind of awkward because we don't know if my teacher could tell what was going on, but then we went to Cold Stone, saw the same teacher. We just prayed they still saw us as innocent. Story 43, I am currently a teacher, but this happened when I was 19 and just out of high school. Was out at the club with a few friends Canada, and we ran into some girls from high school. The night was fairly tame, and about an hour later, I ran into a teacher coach from our school. He coached me in basketball, so I met his wife and kids, and he was a pretty legit guy, probably around 30 to 35 years old. After midnight, when everyone was feeling good, we went into the dance floor and saw this teacher making out with one of our female friends. Probably not too awkward for him if he knew we were all there, but it was definitely awkward for us. Story 44, not really awkward, but pretty awesome last night. It was my best friend's 21st birthday. We all got suitably drunk. We live in the U.S. Then somehow, someone said that I've actually got teacher's number. We all immediately called the number and spoke to them. We have a great conversation on the phone. Since we had every person in his year 12 class present at that party, we had a good talk for about 30 minutes until we hung up and moved on. But then 5 minutes later, he texted me. Somehow, he had my number and said I will be DJing a set at a Northbridge nightclub. Bring the boys. Needless to say that I'm gathering everyone I can think of to go with me. TLDR high school teacher invites old students to see him DJ at a nightclub. Story 45, I once saw my married PE teacher outside my local petrol garage with my married history teacher. Shame they wasn't married to each other, lol. My fat self was happy to have caught them, as revealing I see them together got me out of cross-country running for 2 years P. Story 46, about a year after ID already graduated, a few friends and I returned to my high school at midnight with a bottle of wine and nothing to do. We sat at the table we always used to, talking and laughing. After a couple hours, a pickup truck rolls up next to us outdoor school. I hide the bottle under the table and wait for the scolding and being told to leave. Car turns off, and the fan-favorite bodybuilding physical science teacher steps out and says he needs help putting away his massive telescope away in his classroom. Being the biggest guy at the table, I offered my help and drunkenly carried piece by piece a $1 million telescope with a teacher who could bench 500 pounds at midnight while trespassing. Story 47, 2 blokes. I used Top Go to school with left school during lunch one day to head down to the tab and place bets on some horses, walk in, and run into one of the teachers. After a moment of silence, he says, "Them I won't tell if you don't." Story 48, saw my hot college music teacher a few days back at a bookstore. I was trying to buy some manga, but when I saw him, I had to pretend to be interested in some random novel. He then walked up to me and started going on and on about how great it is and that I should read it, but I only had $6 for the manga ID plan to buy. I tried to tell him that, nah, ID, get it some other day when I could bring more cash, but he waved it off and bought it for me, then grabbed a pen and scribbled his phone number down in it, winking at me and telling me to text him. I'm too shy to text him, edit typo. Story 49, saw him stumble out of the store and fall into the street with a 30 rack of Bud Heavy. He just looked at me and got up and walked across the street to his apartment. Story 50. This particular teacher was one of my favorites in high school. I was part of the speech team, which she was the moderator of, and I went out of my way to help her with speech team. Then senior year, she made it known that she did not respect me at all. So I went to college, came home after the first year, and happened to see her in a store, and she completely acted like she didn't know who I was in front of my mom. Story 51. My high school math teacher was a guest at my sister's wedding. I was 21 at the time. I told some of my buddies I was going to ask her to dance. When a slow song came on, I made the approach and said, "Miss, if it would make my night if you danced with me." She paused, finished her glass of wine, picked up the glass next to her, and finished that. Then said, at the end of our lovely dance, she said, "Now go be a hero to your friends." And Messif was the best. Story 52. I saw my freshman year English teacher waiting on tables at Applebee's this summer after I was a student. He was still a teacher, but must have been trying to pick up some extra money to pay off student loans or just make ends meet during the summer months. Luckily, he wasn't our server, but I spent the entire time avoiding eye contact with him to save us both from embarrassment. Story 53. I was dancing at a bar near campus and saw a cute nerdy chick getting down nearby. I had some drinks in me and approached her. We ended up dancing together, had some more drinks, and I spent the night at her place. In the morning, when we woke up relatively sober, we recognized each other. She was my 30-ish sociology professor. She was freaked out about getting fired for banging a student. I remarked that she was a great example of an empowered woman. I got an A on my final. Story 54. I can add the most awkward time I saw a student outside of school. I was in a town center waiting for husband to get out of work. We share a car. I went to Victoria's Secret and had this big VS bag. I was sitting in Barnes & Noble, and I hear my name being called by a male former second grader. I then catch a glimpse of his now middle school sister. I hightailed it out into a Bath & Body Works and convinced them to give me a big bag to put my VS bag in. Also note that it was summer, so I was in a tank top and pretty short shorts. I really did not want to be spotted. Story 55. When I was in 6th grade, my math teacher told my class that if we ever saw her outside of class and shouted, "Subtraction is adding the opposite," she'd give us extra credit. This became a competition among my friends, who would search the town every weekend in hopes of finding her. About 34 of the way through the year, I woke up one Saturday morning to see her exiting a neighbor's house. Excited, I ran out of my house to yell the statement, only to have my mom quickly usher me back. The following Monday, I received the extra credit, but the class was told that the contest would no longer be running. Only years later did I realize that she was married and had been having an affair. Can't imagine she loved the recognition. Story 56. My very first college class was an elective called Rock and Roll History. Our professor is also a musician in a band that travels a bit. First day of class, he tells us the story of he and his band playing a gig in Chicago. After their set, he notices this very good-looking girl staring at him. His confidence is rising, and she walks over and asks if his name is Rick Darden. He figures she recognizes him from the band, and he smiles and says yes. She then punches him in the face and says, "You failed me in rock history 2 years ago, ouch." Story 57. I've come along multiple teachers often across the years. Once I came across my history teacher, blackout drunk 2 hours after school ended, in a McDonald's. To be fair, we were drunk too. It was the most awkward conversation between teens and an adult not being able to speak properly. Another time, my friends and I were at the bar, having a drink and all, when my history teacher comes in, grabs one of the beers, and just downs it in 2 seconds, said cheers and went back to his friends. We came across his 3 times that year in different bars, then never paid back that drink. Came across my history teacher again in IKEA after I graduated. He said hi and thought my sister was my girlfriend. I have both my religion teacher and math teacher on Facebook, which often results in hilarious conversations. I come across my religion teacher regularly because he quit teaching at my school the year after my class graduated, and I moved to the same city as him. Story 58. I can answer this from teacher perspective. I was student teaching basically in my last year of college to become an English teacher. When half of my day was spent teaching under the supervision of a master teacher, I was a college student and still working a retail store to pay the bills. It was spring break, so I was working at the store while the kids were out of school. There was a student who had been ditching my class up to the last day before spring break and hadn't gotten the packet of work ID sent home with everyone to do. She and her mom come walking around the corner in the store, and I walked right up and said hi. She was so shocked because, of course, I was in uniform apron, name tag in. She totally didn't expect me. "Hi, student. I'm so glad we ran into each other. I missed you in class last week." Well, her mom had no idea she was ditching, of course, and was super happy when I offered to run out to my car and get the packet of work she'd need to do over break, because I still had some copies in my trunk. Story 59. Not me, but a friend of mine. We had this awful biology teacher in school. And when I say awful, I mean awful. He would scream at you if you asked questions. If you talked back, it was all over. and more than once he pulled his shirt off and screamed, "You got a problem with me, boy? You want to have a push-up contest? See who's really the big man?" I'm not kidding. He had a MySpace page dedicated to him, where they took his school picture and photoshopped a Hitler mustache and Nazi uniform onto him. Well, my friend is working at the drive-thru of our local Pizza Hut when he hears a familiar voice. OMG, it's Mr. Williams. He had quite a few run-ins with this guy, because besides being crazy, he was racist. My friend was Mexican, and that didn't sit well with Mr. Williams at all, so he regularly gave him a TON of, well, he takes his order, and the teacher pulls up. He's in a pair of dirty, tidy Witties, an open baby blue bathrobe, and an open 40-ounce Budweiser. He looks up to see my friend and immediately drives off. Didn't even take his order. Mr. Williams didn't give my friend for the rest of the year. The year after I graduated, a few kids glued gay to his car and took a dump on the hood. As I said, he was not well liked. Story 60. So me and my friend went to our local gym and pool. Afterwards, we went to the sauna to relax. Lo and behold, my science teacher is there wearing nothing but his underwear. Boy, that was awkward. Thinking about it now, it was probably just as bad for him because he saw me in nothing but my trunks. Our conversation went something like this. "Hi, sir. Fancy seeing you here. Oh, hi, how you doing? Good?" Story 61. Oh man, probably a bit late for this thread, but I have a humdinger of a story. Just for a bit of context, I spent my teenage years in a boarding school which was separated into boarding houses and their respective houses. When I was about 13, I had an interview to join Mr. S. house and found out shortly afterwards that I had been accepted. After this came the summer holidays, and my family got invited my another to stay with them for 2 nights at the Watchtower, which was a beautiful but very rural house in the middle of nowhere. Think no electricity or heating, with questionable running water to boot. When we got there, lo and behold, Mr. S., who had just split up with his wife, was also there. Due to his being friends with the other family, to cut a long story short, I was expected to share a room with him, which I wasn't best pleased with, but was talked into agreeing to. So the evening goes on, and I ended up going to bed at about 10. At about 1 in the morning, I was woken by a loud thump and a sound that at the tender age of 13, I had never heard before, that of a grown man crying. I was mortifyingly embarrassed to realize that it was Mr. S. crying, but said nothing of it. Hoping to just ignore it and go back to sleep, however, he proceeded to lie in bed and try and talk to me, drunkenly and incoherently telling me how he had his life and lost the only woman he had ever loved. Eventually, we both fell asleep, but it made MY enrollment in his boarding house the following September 1000x more interesting. Story 62. On my way back from vacation in Hong Kong, I met my math teacher on the flight. He reminded me not to skip school the next day, or I was in big trouble. Story 63. Walked to the subway from uni. Another pathway joined into the one I was walking, and as a result, a professor whom I loathe and who loathes me ended up right next to me. We had to walk for 5 whole minutes, and though I didn't give a, I could see on his face that he was uncomfortable, as I decided to keep looking at him in silence to add to his discomfort. When at the subway station, I very pleasantly wished him a good weekend. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't think twice about killing me if he knew he'd get away with it. Oh, the question was about my discomfort. I regret nothing. Story 64. I was at the gym running on the treadmill and watching the news. There was some anti-Bush protest happening, and there was my English teacher screaming into a megaphone on the TV. I then went home and Googled him and found pictures of him at other rallies and protests for teachers, the environment, and politics. The next day, I went up to him in class and said, "Hey, I saw you on the news last night." He looked at me angrily with a little twinge of embarrassment and said, "Don't you ever bring it up to me again. KK, gotcha, chief."